Hello and welcome to episode 408 of the Filmmakers Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk filmmaking, from indie film to studio films and everything in between. How to get them made, how to make them, and how to try not to royally F it up, in our very, very humble opinion. Today we have two brilliant guests joining us on the show to talk about their brilliant Netflix feature film, The Kitchen. We wanted to give some love to this movie. We feel it's a fantastic film, and we wanted to get both the producer Dan Emmerson and the co-director Kibwe Tavares on the show to chat how they made it, what they went through to get this made, and why you can too. How is everyone? How are you doing? Are you alright? Filmmaking can be tough as hell, and it can be really difficult. And sometimes you've just got to battle through those difficult moments. So if you're going through that right now, reach out to someone, reach out to a fellow filmmaker and just have a chat, because it can get you down. We're all in the same boat and we're all paddling upstream as best we can. And it's a shit creek, so we don't want to fall in. So if you have someone you can reach out to, even if it's just to send a message, do. Or if you see someone struggling, more importantly, or you think they might be, or you've not heard from them in a while, reach out yourself. Thank you so much for your love on last week's episode with the genius that is Phil Hawkins and his fantastic movie Robin and the Hoods, which is out now on Sky. It came out on Friday. It's done incredibly well. The love for it is just immense, as it should be. This is a fantastic family movie. I highly recommend you watch it. It's all over your Sky boxes right now. Robin and the Hoods, there it is. That's Phil's movie. Go support. So today, exciting, myself and Dom sat down with co-director Kibwe Tavares and producer Dan Emmerson to chat about The Kitchen. Now, this movie, it closed the BFI London Film Festival and it was in select cinemas before streaming on Netflix earlier this year. And like I say, it did incredibly well. And it's the feature-length directorial debut of both Kibwe Tavares, who directs it with Oscar winner Daniel Kaluuya. And Tavares and Kaluuya, along with Dan Emmerson, they began developing the project 10 years ago. And then about 8 years ago, the film was selected for Sundance's Screenwriting and Directing Lab. And then it took a further 6 years before the film was actually shooting, and it was shot on location in London and a little bit in Paris, which you find out about. The movie stars Kano, or Kane Robinson, Jedediah Bannerman, Hope Ipoku Jr., Tasia Cabs, and Ian Wright. Yeah, that's right, he stars as Lord Kitchener, the footballer. Of course, Ian Wright. He's actually brilliant in this movie. The film was written by Daniel Kaluuya, as I said, along with Joe Murta, and it was produced by Daniel Kaluuya and Dan Emmerson. Cinematography was by Wyatt Garfield. We did this in two separate interviews, so I think we'll start with the producer, Dan Emmerson, because he describes how the film got off the ground, and then Kibwe Tavares talks about his directing journey and what that felt like co-directing with Oscar winner Daniel Kaluuya. The Kitchen is a dystopian thriller where social housing has been eliminated. Only one community, known as the Kitchen, remains, but it's at risk of being erased by the rich. So before the interview starts with Dan Emmerson, I will play the trailer for you. But first of all, I want to give a shout out to Rob Ayling, who is kickstarting at the moment for his short film Punching Bag. Now, Rob is not only a fantastic guy, but a brilliant filmmaker as well. He's a former coffee shop barista champion turned filmmaker, and now he's a screenwriter and director, best known for his award-winning short films, which have screened at various film festivals, including BAFTA and Academy Award qualifiers. So, this is a story about an amateur boxer who battles his demons as well as his opponents in what could prove to be the fight of his life. It's called Punching Bag. It's on Kickstarter now. Link to that is in the show notes. Go support this great filmmaker. If nothing else, go to his Twitter page or his Instagram page, which is at Rob Ayling on Instagram and at Rob Ayling Film on Twitter. Support this man. support fellow filmmakers. It's important. Okay, let's get to the episode. Like I say, we're going to start with Dan Emmerson, who is the producer of Jet Trash, as well as Calm with Horses, which was chomping at the bit to get out the gates in 2019 and 2020 and did extremely well then, was released by Film 4, as well as exec producing Scrapper. Yep, that's right, it was Charlotte Regan's film, which again blew up this year, called Scrapper, as well as The Kitchen, which is out now on Netflix. So do go watch this after you've listened to this if you haven't already. If you have already, why not watch it again? But first of all, here's Dan Emmerson chatting to myself, Giles Alderson, and fellow host Dom Lenoir, who is in bed now and not doing the intro with me. So I'm doing the puns. So get your knives and forks ready. Yes, chef. It's nothing to do with cooking. Here it is. This is mine and Dom's chat with Dan Emmerson.
Good morning. This is the Low Kitchen, live and direct.
I'm getting out of this place.
It's our home.
Shit gets real. Saving myself.
So where do you live?
Kitchen.
Is it really like what they say it's like?
Yeah.
You say it by yourself.
What's your name? You ain't built like them.
I haven't got anywhere else to go.
What's he to you?
Friend of mine.
Some friend. We gotta go.
What's happening?
You want to know what it's like, right? This is war.
Grab that. It's a little rattly, so hold it as firmly as you dare.
Okay.
Sometimes they've got
Bit of personality.
bit of
isn't it?
personality. I like that. Yeah.
Oh, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah?
Bit nervous, but really excited.
You shouldn't be. It's a great film.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
I know that this is probably more about you asking me about stuff, but I'm kind of.
Well, okay. I mean, yeah.
It's nice for me to just hear some people talk about it.
For sure.
I mean, it's great. No, I mean, I really liked it. First of all, I think sci-fi is really hard to get right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the time it's not believable.
Yeah.
It's one of the easiest ones to overplay.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the most grounded sci-fis, and also it's so based in something that's completely plausible for 2, 5, 10 years time.
Yeah.
And it's also it captures the heart of London. It captures a sort of political landscape. It captures corporations running wild and screwing people over. And it all does it very sort of convincingly in a very well acted way. So,
the dystopian side of it, the beauty within the sort of the horror.
Yeah.
It's a stunning piece of work, especially from two debut directors, and I know that they've both worked a lot in terms of other departments. And
no, but it's very much a debut, and it was
right?
like we started the journey 10 years ago, and everyone was really like, we just all I think wanted to learn and learn by making, but it was very much was a debut, and people trying to. I think with a debut, you make the film, but while you make the film, you're learning how to do your job on that film, and that's often why debuts take a long time to develop or to make or to get right or whatever, because it's not just the process of getting the film ready; it's the process of you yourselves being ready to make that film, and that was definitely our.
What were some of the things that have?
Can I just check something? Is this no one give me the context? This is
filmmakers podcast.
Yeah.
So we're filmmakers.
Yeah. But is the whole thing is recorded, or you use bits of it, or
No, the whole
of
thing.
it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we can edit out
Yeah.
anything you don't want.
Can you edit out that
anything
bit?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Well, I'm asking you what's going on.
That's the
No,
bit
that's-
I'm keeping
that's
in.
staying in.
That's the trailer.
You've got some audience.
No, because we're filmmakers, we do this to help filmmakers. So we never want to catch anyone out. This is us, helping our filmmakers learn. So
Alright, cool.
this is why we do this.
All right,
'Cause
cool, man. Sorry, I didn't. No one told me.
no, exactly. Yeah.
So what was some of the big changes that happened from that initial sort of idea inception through all the various labs, up until the shooting process? Like, how did the story and the characters evolve?
I sort of feel like the main change, and that was actually going on through the edit, was, but certainly had started through the script stage, but was to focus in on like an intimate relationship piece, really, between Izzy and Benji. It started. We have had so many different ideas or iterations of the film over the years, but the seed of the very, very first seed of the idea that Daniel heard was about these smash and grab robberies that happened in Westfield
On mopeds, right?
On mopeds.
Yeah.
And there is definitely like an essence of that in the finished film, but that definitely became increasingly pared back over the process. We had like a number of different characters, relationships, things that we want to focus on. And in the end, I feel like the real essence of the film is about Izzy and Benji's relationship and the battle for community. And those were and where we got to was that, like, if it wasn't serving one of those two things, then there was too much in the film. So there were loads of ideas that might have been linked to like a dystopian prediction or like care, or there was a whole strand in it. Some of which we shot, called Inner Child, which was like the care system, the care system would look like in UK. And in the end, it just became about Izzy and Benji, what's stopping them being together, and the battle for the kitchen, and the relationship between those two things. And anything outside of that, you could go to Life After Life because that was Izzy's job, and because that was where Tony had her funeral and Kitchener had his funeral, spoiler, but whatever, you know what I mean? But other than that, I think a lot of it is a process of distilling. But then when you get into the final stage of the script, and then the shooting, and then the edit, it's about, right, we got to tell a story and make it, and I think that is also the debut thing. It's like, as debut filmmakers, maybe if like it was like Scorsese or Steve McQueen or whatever, you can like tell a bunch of different stories in one film. But like when you're learning and when you're all still sort of doing it, it's important that I think you focus on telling like one or two stories well.
I think that's what made it so interesting, this one, though, because, you could have focused on the motorcycle robberies, and you could have focused on all the riots, and you could have focused on him sort of joining the gang and becoming like that. And then, that sort of, but they feel like stories that have already been told.
Great.
And what you've done is actually like feels a lot more original, and it was, much more
wicked,
intimate.
man. I really appreciate you saying that.
Well,
That's
working
nice to
like with debut directors, then, like you say, it can take 10 years. And I think you've done this in the past, right? Calm with Horses with Nick as well.
Yeah,
Was it
yeah.
his debut?
Yeah, that was
a great
Nick's
one.
debut. Yeah.
Great movie.
We
And
spoke to Neve on
we
on
did.
one of the podcast.
Yeah,
Did you?
she's fantastic.
Neve's wicked. Yeah.
Yeah, she's really funny.
So for with that, then, because like you say, you've done it a few times now.
No, twice.
Just twice.
Calm with Horses was the first
First
time I
one.
did it,
And
and
this
this
one.
is the second
Yeah,
one.
a few.
Second one, and we did. There's a film called Scrapper at the moment,
Yeah,
but
Scrapper.
that wasn't. I didn't produce that. Theo produced that,
Ah,
but I
okay,
execed
but-
it. So
yeah.
we've worked a lot. We work a lot with debut filmmakers, and yeah, it's amazing, and it's hard. It's hard, but it's because it's what I said. You got anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I've worked with debut directors, and so have you. And it's trying to, Because I remember when my first film as a director, and you're the same. You just kind of go, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing. But it's hard to listen to people around you sometimes because you think you know everything, and then you make it and you go, oh my God. Yeah. What do you bring to that then? How do you guide them? Because like you say, 10 years of making this film is incredible. The Kitchen, 10 years, that's like you go, great. Yeah. But during that time, how do you keep it afloat?
I would have much rather us all do it much more quickly.
Yeah, of course you would.
But not spend a decade on everything.
Get nowhere.
But I'm really proud of us all that the film exists, because there are many like moments in the journey where it could have not happened, where anyone could have said, right, this isn't the right thing for me. For now, it wasn't ready to get made. People weren't ready to make whatever. It was just that I won't go into all of it, but there are many, many moments where
it's going to some of it.
Like, no, I just mean that when you go on a journey like that, you know, you have to keep fighting and fighting for the film, you know, and from my end anyway, I had this belief in the combination of Daniel's perception of like human beings and human behavior and how he sort of saw the essence of people, and Kibwe's world building, the way he looked at how environments and affect human behavior. And I thought the combination of those two sort of imaginations, creativity, could bring something really interesting and original and personal, you know, but also otherworldly or dystopian, or, you know, so I always felt really inspired by the idea of those two things. And that drove me to just keep going, and them to keep going when it didn't look like it was going to happen, when either of their lives or any of our lives, other things came up or whatever, all the things that, or people, we didn't quite get there on the script, or finances at the time weren't going to make that type of film, or all the things that you encounter on a journey like that like, definitely for me, I had a belief in what the end thing could be. That meant I was like, we just got to keep going. We got to keep going.
Did Netflix join at quite a late stage, or was that what got it greenlit? Like, what was the final catalyst of getting the money in place?
We go into a script process with Film 4 that takes years to get it right. Yeah. And then at a certain point, we're ready to send this to actors and to financiers. And we did send it out. And Netflix were the company at that point of a bunch of companies that read it. Some others were interested as well, but Netflix were the ones that were like, we believe in you guys enough to make this, and we want to encourage you to be sort of ambitious with it, like as well, like scale wise. And that's the moment you're making the film, really, you know. So yeah.
Do you think it was all the workshopping that got you in the door, or was it like sort of other connections that sort of got Netflix to look at it? Or was it just like, you know,
no, just everyone knew about the workshops. Got the workshops that we did at the beginning, which was born out of us just wanting to learn and do it ourselves, and just having like a bit of get up and go about it. That got us at the development of Film 4, and at that point, you know, that made the project real. Yeah. But Netflix, by that time, you know, Daniel was a superstar. Not at the beginning of the journey, but Daniel was a superstar. Yeah. Kibwe had made like a bunch of really amazing visual short films, and we'd already been speaking to Kane about playing Izzy. So at that point, to be honest, there were lots of people that were interested in sort of what they saw as and we had a bunch of visuals and stuff, that what they saw as the like potential of the film. That part was not the hardest part. Actually, the hardest part was getting the project to the point where we felt it was ready to be made, you know.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But not everyone has Daniel.
That was going to say.
You know what I mean? Not everyone has Daniel, and when Daniel started, it was the first time, right? Like writer,
which must help in some way, because his star has risen in the last 10 years massively. Then people suddenly go, what Daniel's attached to it. It does help in some way, but also
halfway through the process, suddenly my phone started ringing. You know what I mean? All the people that wouldn't like, not that we weren't trying to go into production before that because it wasn't ready, but suddenly people started calling me and being like, what's that? What, you know, and I could just feel the energy of it changes. And that is ultimately down to the amazing work Daniel did as a performer and an actor, and the success of those films. You know,
Were people pushing for him to be in it as well? Was it something that, in terms of
talk to him about that.
We'll talk to, I'll move on from that.
We've got to
question.
wait till January.
Yeah, wait till January till he's free.
Yeah.
In terms of producing then and making a movie like this, obviously you shot in Paris as well.
Yeah.
Right? 5 days across in Paris.
That was a late decision.
Yeah, because you couldn't find a necessary location that looked right, or too much CGI would be used.
We couldn't find in London. Well, a lot of the most aesthetically interesting sort of social housing in London has already been taken down or redeveloped, right? Yeah. So there wasn't like, we looked at places like Elephant and Castle, like that, you know, that were already under redevelopment, and we found some interesting spaces, but nothing that like really spoke to Kibwe's aesthetic as a filmmaker. And then, and this is where like Netflix were really, it was, you know, Fiona Lamptey at the time was really, they were ambitious with it, you know, rather than being like, they said, have you thought about going abroad? And, you know, we sort of set the film up as a UK indie. And if you're a UK indie, you're thinking we can't at this stage go and do that, you know, but they said, have you thought about it? We sent our location manager to Paris. He came back with some places that just looked, and one of them was Les Damiers, which is in the financial district in Paris. And it's a completely deserted sort of massive building. And the wides of the kitchen, that is Damier. So we made the decision with about 6 weeks to go there for 5 days at the end of the shoot. And it was really hard. It was tough on production, tough on the schedule, tough on the budget, tough on the teams who thought they were doing one thing, but it was completely the right decision for the movie. And and then we scanned it, you know, so all the visual effects guys scanned it, and then so a lot of the visual effects in the film really is putting Damier into the background of the London Electricity Building in Bethnal Green, which is where we shot all the markets. Most of the stuff was shot there in and around London, but we did a sort of visual effects set extension.
I'm glad you did, because you see so many like, you know, inverted comma London sci-fis, and it's just London, and it's like it's just exactly the same. The actual buildings haven't really changed; they've just got like a modernization, and it really gave it like a sort of original feel to it by doing that.
Well, thanks, man, because it was a hassle.
I was going to say, we'll talk about that hassle. I think any hassle in filmmaking, especially as a producer, you go, oh, I don't want to do that. Yeah, because now suddenly
that wasn't my that isn't how I work anyway, and that wasn't my relationship with the film. Maybe in 10 years it will be, or maybe on the next one it will be, but I loved the project so much that I was probably a nightmare for the financiers or the co-producer or the line producer, but my instinct was always like, if the filmmakers felt we could do something that would make the film better, I would always want to push and fight for that, you know, rather than, you know, the budget or you know, within reason. You have to be like, but just being honest, you know, that was my relationship with the film was about just I'd given so much time to it that I just wanted it to be the best it could be. Really.
I think that makes the best producers, though, the ones who actually fight for what the filmmaker wants, even though sometimes it can be really difficult and against maybe the whole process of what you're doing. But
because saving money doesn't actually, you know, I was saying this the other day, like it doesn't save if the performance isn't like deeply moving, or if the story isn't you know, really amazing, or the visuals aren't incredible. All of that translates to a feeling, and that feeling translates to money. Yeah. And if you have like, you know, cut corners in those departments, then you know, where are you going?
Yeah. But it's a balance in that, because you, no one should be saving money for the sake of saving money, but there's a finite amount of money. So really it's about the allocation of resource. Like, are you spending your money in the best possible way for the film? Like, and that is more the question than like, let me keep it back. And that's where you need good people around you. You know, we had an amazing co-producer on the film, a guy called Angus Lamont, who's who's amazing.
Legend.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. He's a legend, and he's a wise old sage. And, you know, he would often like pull me to one side and we talk about things like that. And he also always had the film's like best interests at heart, but he would straighten me out when I needed to be straightened out.
Yeah. Well, because that's it. You need that sometimes.
Sometimes you really need experience by you. You know, you do need a balance of that, I think. You know?
What was the most difficult part of the shoot in terms of, you know, scene by scene?
I think that it's obviously like it's a film with a lot of different elements in it. So I don't know if I'd say like this was the most difficult thing, but I do think shooting action when none of the filmmakers or the producer in me have like action experience is it's really technical. It's sort of undervalued, and there were a lot of those scenes or set pieces where we really sort of just struggle with the technical block. It's a completely different thing to blocking a drama. Obviously, like Daniel knows like performance inside out. Like Kane and Jediah brought like the most beautiful emotion to these people, you know, and those things, creating the right environment for that is really difficult and nuanced as well. But on a technical level, those films that are like where they're action heavy, that stuff is real. And we were moving between the two and getting that stuff right. So that stuff we found difficult. Obviously, there's a lot of bike footage. There was that one smash and grab that we said, like, that stuff is really hard to make feel dynamic and exciting. You know, what was in our head and then getting it there is that stuff. And that again, I think is an area where you actually just need experience by your side. You just need someone sort of to come in and hopefully they understand the essence of the story. So they're not just doing it in isolation, but then they sort of say to you, this is how I do it, you know.
Do you think that's one of the most important things as a producer, to have experience around you? Like, because you are experienced, you know, you've worked on some great films over your time, but also do you feel, because you can be lonely as a producer, it can be
very lonely,
right? it can be heartbreaking and you feel lost, and you need someone to support you as a producer sometimes.
Definitely.
So having Angus around or having other people, do you feel that is one of the biggest bits of
Theo
advice?
was around a lot during the sort of development of it. Yeah, I think having support, having producing partners. Also, Daniel produced the film with me, and he was doing a number of things, but he was amazing. Like as a producer as well, you know, he brought so much to that stage of things, that element of things. He had experience working on some of those bigger films that he's been on, whether that's through the marketing or conversations with the studio or like how we'd approach like some key things. He was really, really present in those conversations as well, which was invaluable. But I do think as a producer, you encounter a lot of like really difficult situations where you're asked to use your judgment, or like, you know, people call it like firefighting, or there's problems that you have to try and help resolve or solve and stuff. And that's where you need the right support system around you. And that can be just elders. It doesn't necessarily need to be someone working on the film. It can be someone, you know, I've got a bunch of people who I call in those situations, but it took me a while to realize I need those people in my life that I can just call. For me, my process is to bounce. I have to ask 4 or 5 people what they think about something, and then I work out what my way is, but I can't do it without conversation. So that's my, you know.
Love that.
Do you have one last bit of advice for aspiring producers?
Don't
do it.
There is obviously a bit of that.
Is there?
There is a bit of that when you get to, you know, there is a part of me that feels that, but then there's also a part of me that feels totally blessed to have been on the journey and
you keep going anyway.
You keep going. I mean, as I said at the beginning, I'm proud of us that we kept going in all the times when we could easily have we could easily have given up. That's not really advice though, is it? I don't know.
No, that is advice.
Nice enough. Yeah.
Well, you got to have people around. You got to have good people around you. You got to have good people around you, and I think you've got to listen as well. Like you've got to listen and keep going, keep getting up and going again, and getting up and going again, and getting up and going again, and then, you know, hopefully, well, in this case, we got to make
movie.
it, you know.
Yeah.
What I mean? Hopefully,
and it's on Netflix, so
it's pretty
got there
impressive.
in the end.
Yeah. Daniel Emmerson, thank you so much.
No worries, man. Lovely to speak to you both.
And you, all the best.
Thanks.
So that was Dan Emmerson chatting with me and Dom there about The Kitchen and the process behind it. Fascinating. It's really, really interesting, the journeys of filmmakers trying to get the movies made. Even when you're successful, even when you have produced Calm with Horses and you've produced Scrapper, it's still not easy. It's a long journey, this one. It really is. And even if you have Daniel Kaluuya in your corner as well, that doesn't mean doors are going to open. So you've got to work really hard on your script to make sure it's the best it can be, and then get the best team around you and work as hard as you can. Right, let's go on to the director, the co-director, Kibwe Tavares, who also joins me and Dom to chat through going from short films to features and how that journey differed and how it meant something to him to actually make his feature film, and what it was like to co-direct with Daniel Kaluuya as well. He has made the award-winning shorts Robot and Scarecrow, Jonah and Robots of Brixton, before making his feature debut with The Kitchen. There is a bit of rattling on Kibwe's microphone. We did our best to cut that out, but it's still there at some point, so don't get too annoyed. It's us doing this for nothing, so hope you don't mind too much. Sounds not terrible. If you do like this podcast, tell your pals. You know that's very important. Help us grow. Help me keep wanting to do this. Give us a nice review. Write on Twitter. Now, listen to the podcast and really enjoyed it, and you should too. And do the same on Instagram. Why not? Why not? Okay, here's Kibwe Tavares chatting with myself and Dom. Grab the mic, hold it close to yours, yeah.
Very, very nice jacket. I'm a big appreciator of a good jacket.
A good jacket.
How are you feeling?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm feeling all right. Like, excited.
I mean, it's an incredibly polished film. Like, it's really gripping, and I think what made it so impactful is it's so relatable, and it feels like something that genuinely could happen in a couple of years. It doesn't feel like a sci-fi that's like removed from reality. It feels like very, very grounded. It gets people on side. It's a really moving.
Yeah, I think that was always the intention. You know, from the start, it was like, how can we sort of like tell something that's really grounded and human? And I always thought that between us, could always be our lane. You know, we've got sort of like there's certain skill sets towards sort of like from my background in architecture to then the sort of world building stuff that then allows you to tell those, you know, those films, this, you know, that I've got a love for sort of like, you know, like an Oddiyard movie or something like that, which I sort of like love that. The sort of how intimate they feel, but then I guess there was in my shorts, you maybe saw that there was like scope potentially for how do you sort of expand that and how do you sort of like pull a slightly wider audience in as well. Yeah, but maybe that's the thing where we started. So
yeah, totally, it's totally evident in your short. It's what, you know, Robots in Brixton, wasn't it? Something similar title to that.
Yeah, that was my first one.
Yeah, right. How fascinating. Were you always interested in the sort of architecture of the world, you know, and in terms of putting that onto screen?
It was a bit, but it was also like, I think it's a bit of a long story then. It was basically, I studied architecture. There was a point, you know, I was always into animation and drawing and design. And then the point where it's like, go to uni, my dad was like, you need to do something proper.
Really?
And so then architecture was the thing. It was like, you're good at maths and you're good at drawing. So architecture. And I was like, okay, why not? And then, you know, I went to different schools, ended up at the Bartlett, which is very creative. School, and then we made these. That was like it's just crazy where there's just so much sort of like creative output. Some units done film, some units done model making, some units done hand drawing, and then I sort of worked in an animation one, doing my degree from my parents as well as sort of like being able to sort of move into animation and filmmaking.
How did the story start for this film? Because how did you sort of get involved with it? What was the first eyes on the idea?
So the idea, it started a long time ago. It started on my previous short, Jonah. I remember there was one day when me and Daniel were sort of just talking, and we basically had like equivalent wishes. He wanted to start writing. I was looking for my first film to start directing, and we wanted to basically use those once to sort of like start working together, and you know, and then we basically started with a workshop that me and both Daniel producer and
Daniel co-director,
we were putting a bit of money each, and we basically like shot some workshops down in a barbershop in Holloway Road.
Yeah,
and then from then we went into more sort of formal development, and then over time we just started to develop it further and further and further until took it to Sundance Labs, and then greenlit it end of 21, early 22 is when we shot.
What was the process of the co-writing? Like, how did you sort of divide roles? Did you sort of did you discuss the world building first, or was it like, okay, well, let's work out exactly what's going to happen in each scene, and then you do this one, I do that one?
It was very organic. It was never sort of like as linear as that. It wasn't like it was more like, how can we build this together? So it's really just lots and lots of conversation to start with. We spoke a lot about London, a lot about our relationship with London, and then that evolved into different story strands that I started to pull out, and it was really based from conversation and evolution over time. And then, like, as we went, you know, new ideas came in, but then how can we sort of like focus that to story? I wasn't necessarily co-writing. I was adding to the process, but I wasn't writing it. Daniel's the writer. We had,
yeah. But like very much a collaboration.
Yeah, it's a collaboration. Yeah.
And what was some of the input that Sundance Labs had? Because I think it'd be interesting for anyone that's sort of taking things to an institution, and like how that affects the story specifically.
The labs it's amazing because you have this, like, you're sort of in the mountains in Utah, right? Then you have all of these amazing advisors that come and help you. I remember our first advisor meeting was with Thomas Bidigan, who wrote A Prophet.
Wow.
And then you start getting all your notes on your screenplay, and you're like looking at these guys, and you're like, oh shit, sorry, I don't know if I can swear.
You can, yeah. Totally can.
This guy's a legend. And then you start to sort of take on their thoughts and their notes, and they start to enrich. And then the directors lab you up there for sort of like 5-6 weeks. You have to shoot 3 or 4 scenes from your film.
Okay.
All right.
And so I think my year we had Boots Riley was there.
Wow.
So then you're seeing like kind of scenes from Sorry to Bother You, and you're sort of doing read-throughs, and then you're also getting feedback from all these advisors. So like, you know, like I remember Glenn Close coming on our set and advising, like, and then you're there being like, I think I don't have to direct, and then and there's other directors, but there's always like, as a sort of nurturing experience, it's kind of like really, really powerful one. And sort of like, I think I remember growing. There's also the intensity of just like sort of being just focused on and singular on one thing at a time. Is really powerful as well, just because you're up there, you're in the middle of nowhere, you don't ever really leave. And
sounds like a film in itself.
Yeah.
Is it cold?
Yeah.
How long were you there for?
So the director's lab's 5 weeks. The writer's lab is, I think, and then it's 5 weeks, and you have a writing lab at the back of it. But the writing lab is in January, and that's, I think, 10 days or something like that. So
right.
It's about 6 weeks, or in total, if you add it up together, like a long time.
A long time. But they're giving you some development money, right?
So they don't really give you development money. There's some grants they support you with as artists, but it's not specifically for, it's so you can sort of focus on your filmmaking. So it's just to buy you time.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not a specific grant for your film, as it were, but they really support the artists within it.
It's so hard for filmmakers when they're trying to get the first film made. How do you do it
to get from script basically to greenlit? So how did you get from, you know, this great idea you're also working on to having the film greenlit?
Yeah, so that started initially. We started with our own, you know, we were like, we're going to put some money in, we're going to try these workshops, and we're going to just make something. We planned on going fast, right? That was our plan. It's like, you know, fail fast and like, you know, try. And we were looking at sort of like, you know, took Shane Meadows, going on the weekend and shooting films and just essentially kind of like cutting your teeth. And then so we done the workshop, and then because we'd done the short with Film 4 as well, we basically went into a more formal development process with Film 4. And then so that's where our development funding came from. It came from them sort of supporting the process through the writing process, as well as like, you know, there's so over time them developing with us, and then we started to kind of like do bits of artwork and design and lookbooks over the course of over the period of time developing it. So, but it does take a while. So it's like you have to like find a way of like finding your system of surviving as well whilst you do it.
Yeah, so it's either a parallel job or just struggle
Basically,
when you're trying to like really focus on those kind of passion projects.
Yes, it's always difficult. It's never easy, I think, for any filmmaker.
No.
So you've got the finished project. What was Film 4's? Do you ever have moments when you're working with a collaborator like that and you think, okay, well, you know, they've got these ideas are great, but maybe this is going in a different direction? Did you have any of those things you had to sort of navigate as a team?
As a team, specifically from like over time, because Film 4 developed it with us, and we had lots of amazing execs that, you know, that we developed with over time. And then you just have to navigate sort of like the focus on what it is, and like, you know, because it has to sort of like also like, you almost have to, like, especially when you do an original thing from scratch, if there's no IP, so you almost have to generate the IP yourself. So you kind of almost have to write the novel to then be able to kind of work the film out. So I think that was what was a lot of the process, really kind of like, getting all ideas down and then sort of really working out, okay, cool, what's the film inside this? Because it wasn't like we said, this is the genre and this is that film was going to be from the start. We had an organic way in, so then it meant for sort of an organic, sort of a more flowing way to kind of get to the sort of final sort of script in it, as it were. So it wasn't necessarily like, oh, they're pushing us this way. You sort of hear stories of sort of like execs or whatnot pushing people in certain ways. It wasn't that. It was just more sort of like we needed to kind of generate the material to sort of like, it wasn't like, here's a book, let's sort of find a way of adapting that book, and there's different versions of it. There's one sort of like massive version of the book. So we had to sort of like go through that process, really.
Yeah, that's great.
And what about, co-directing then? Because obviously you've made your shorts yourself. You've done them that way. Now you're working with Daniel as a team. How was that process for you? Because it's never easy. And I know that obviously I've read something about it was more difficult for you with actors at first because you hadn't necessarily worked with actors in a certain way. And I suppose bringing that into it with Daniel and that collaboration must have been fascinating. With
Daniel, again, it was the process we started a while ago. So really over time, it was just like a collaborative, like, how do we serve the film? Do you see what I mean? So, and in terms of the thing with actors, I think for me, where I mentioned that before, it was really just about when I started training as an architect, it was just like all the technical stuff felt like, okay, I can learn that, and understand camera, understand like
how things are built and put together.
Okay, so that stuff felt like, okay, I can learn that very easily. Whereas performance, it was something that I felt like I needed to throw myself into, and that's what some of the workshops were initially to start with. Was like, how can I jump into that? Because it's like you don't really have an equivalent. Like I think in architecture you can look for similar equivalents across the board, whereas there's nothing, I don't think, that relates to that. So I think that was like slight like apprehension or slight anxiety going into it from me. So it wasn't necessarily a thing about difficulty. It's just more sort of like, I don't have that as a tool in my box yet. But and I guess over time you just learn, okay, well actually it's really communication and how to communicate humans, which I know and I understand. I've got emotional intelligence. So it's more like, how do I then use my life skills to like, and it's just a sort of part of the process of getting in, and then co-directing it was really what served the film and the collaboration along. And so we got complementary skills, so we learned on each other for different things. It wasn't like who done this bit or we done that bit. It was really, how do we sort of like utilize what we got together as a team to kind of like deliver what we think can be like the best film possible.
Yeah, I mean, performances are so important, and it's a very, especially if you've sort of grown up with, seeing films as, okay, I'm going to have the camera here and X, Y, Z. It is all very like single dimensional, how you sort of plan stuff. Whereas when you're doing performances, there's so many ways that you have to go around, and it's like a completely new art. I went to acting class just to try and understand it because it was so different from all the other sort of ways that I used to sort of do prep. So how do you work with the rehearsal process with the actors, like on this, for instance?
So on this, it depends on the actor as well, and it depends on the person. So say with Jed, it was his first time on screen, and he's young as well. So the first thing was just about getting to know each other. So I remember the first time we met, he's from South London as well. I mean, we just went bowling, right?
Nice.
So it was
Where
literally.
Did you go? Elephant? Did you go?
No, it was dripped down by then. I think we actually went to Croydon. So it's just, the first thing was like, okay, cool, let's start to get to know each other, so that when we were on set, we just had to sort of build up a base language. So we can just learn how to communicate with each other. When we got much closer to the shoot, we started to work a little bit with a coach with him. It's really just about building trust and spending time together and sort of starting to work out how to communicate certain ideas. And then, Jed, over time, as we sort of saw him grow up within the shoot. So it's about trust and time and just sort of like getting used, and then him finding the character. And then, as you go on, it's more just about shifting and pushing him in certain ways, pulling him in certain directions. But I'd like to do a lot of work up front. So you sort of like, so you've got like a really sort of like clear level of communication, so that when you go in, you know each other, and then you can sort of like, so then it starts to become more sort of seamless.
You said you did work up front. Was that including your sort of camera plans and ideas, and obviously all the rehearsals and time you had? Was that also part of your process?
Yeah, so I try to. So normally I do like quite a detailed script breakdown. Sometimes, depending on the intensity of the sequence, if it's more, if it's more action, we try to storyboard. But at least try to kind of almost like go through the script and almost like write down shot for shot how I'm sort of breaking down how I want to sort of like shoot it in terms of like how do I get to intent of that, and then I try to visualize it. And it comes a bit from my past in architecture. I used to do or in animation. I used to sort of do a lot of previs in which I would sort of like animate or make crude sort of animatics of certain sequences as my way of sort of like getting it into my head so that when you get on set, I've got a version of it. What was interesting this time around was volume, I guess, like, like in terms of like the jump from shorts to features was how many shots are in the film. So then sometimes, or like how fast certain things can change, or when there's something that's outside of your control, like you can't go on that street and you might have been like, okay, I want to do that, or like, and then you have to adapt. And the sort of volume of that you then have to sort of navigate, which was new.
What were some of the ways that you distinctly wanted to show off this film in terms of like how the camera moved, what sort of lenses you were using, what sort of colors? Because it's a very, again, it's a sci-fi, and there's moments when it needs to feel like a sci-fi, but it also needs to feel grounded and in our kind of time frame as well. So what were some of the decisions along that route that you got to?
So I think we even started to develop some of the language within the labs where you start to shoot, for all your scenes. And for me, it was always trying to basically like find a way to respond to performance, really. So it wasn't like, I need this shot where exactly this happens. It's like, how can we allow the actors a bit of space to block? And then how can we then build a language that can then support that? And then how can it also, if you think of like, I guess I'm a big fan of like Shane Meadows and, films like This Is England, but then how can you sort of like keep that fluidity? But then you're doing this here within a world where you've got VFX and you've got set extensions, you've got the sort of like thing, but then how can you also like keep it sort of feeling natural without having to do, cause sometimes you need to have like a lot of measurements and a lot of setup to kind of have that. And I think into my previous shorts, I think Robot and Scarecrow in particular, we sort of like a lot of the techniques I learned were like, how can you shoot with a certain amount of freedom, but still have sort of a higher level of execution and finish, and not have to kind of be like, shoot everything in the blue room, which you then got nothing. So we always wanted to kind of have a base of something real. Like even when we did shoot on the set, you had a base of something real that then, so then you're sort of in a space that's grounded. And then if we're extending or we're building on top of, it's additive, but you're trying to kind of create like, so you're never really having someone like sort of go and talk to like a blue tennis ball or something like that. Like it's always like, you have the sort of groundedness of something that feels like really intimate, but then you have the scope to allow yourself to expand on it.
Amazing.
What did you learn making this film as a director, your first feature, if you like? Even though we can make so many films, but suddenly that first feature seems like a barrier to get across sometimes. It can feel like a big hurdle. What did you learn during that process for you as a filmmaker?
I learned so much. I think key takeaways are sort of like, when you're doing smaller stuff, you're like, and even though my shorts were quite big, but you're like, okay, cool, let's go in. I want to go and shoot in this corner. And because of the lack of infrastructure, even though sometimes it's frustrating because you're like, I don't have this piece of kit or I don't have this, but then it also means that you lose a certain amount of freedom. And so it means that like, or lightness of foot, right? So then it means that like you then have to, so the prep has to be slightly different because you can't be as light footed. So then like if you want to try something, so it's also like you have to then sort of learn how to adapt to that, so then maybe planning for that, because I still think sometimes it's me planning for like, okay, look, I'm shooting as if there's like, 20 of us, but there's like 100 people. So like if we want to turn around and yeah, and I think it's going in and being more precise from the sort of like offset as opposed to sort of like freedom maybe you have when you're doing sort of like the jump from shorts to features.
Amazing. Well, it's such a good film. We really enjoyed our chat. So good sci-fi is hard to come by, I always say, and this is definitely a good one.
Yeah, congratulations.
Appreciate you guys.
Kibwe, thank you for your time, buddy.
Thank you.
There we have it. that was this week's inspirational episode for you, all about making a dystopian thriller, how you can go out there and do it. The journey was fascinating, and how important it is to have great collaborators around you. Just proves it, doesn't it? It really does. Right, I am knackered, I am hot and sweaty because it's boiling hot at the moment. I'm up in my loft, it's late at night. Like I say, Dom's probably fast asleep by now. I need to edit the rest of this podcast and put it out before getting up really early, because we're filming tomorrow an advert. So I'm filming an advert tomorrow. I need to be on my A game. So I'm going to get to sleep as soon as possible. For now, though, if you do like this, as I say, not only tell your pals, but give us a nice review. Support us in any way you can, because it is just us doing this. And the more support we get, the more likely we're going to keep getting the big guests that we're getting. And it's very important that we're at the top of those charts. So if you haven't yet, and some of you haven't who listen to this regularly, click the plus button, click the subscribe. It's simple, it's easy, and that means that this podcast will go to the top of your list every time an episode comes out. But if you don't, it doesn't, and you have to search for it every time. So do that for us. Right, you're all amazing. I love having you in my life, and I hope you do too. So until next Tuesday, when we have even more amazing guests. But until then, support this film, The Kitchen, and support your fellow filmmakers around you. It's very important. And if you are lucky enough to rise up and do well, it is your duty to get out the kitchen, because it's too hot. Definitely isn't this loft. It's your duty to send the elevator back down. We will see you next Tuesday. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.